Plus 5.
Max
6,
needs thermal curtain failure.
9, 10.
Oh my god!
Thermal curtain failure. Max and Jinx, friends forever.
3, 4, 5.
We have overheat on Booster B.
Temperature? 1,200 degrees and climbing. Get that thing operational.
The thermal curtain is failing.
10 minutes to test.
We're past shutdown temperature. We can't stop it.
We have thermal curtain failure.
What does that mean? Andy!
Booster B, temperature is critical.
Catherine, get out of there now!
Andy, make them stop. Make them turn it off.
They're trying!
Booster B is near ignition. It's gonna light.
Andy, help us! My booster ain't, goddammit, launched us or we're gonna explode! What's happening? Please, Andy!
Hey, Adrenalheads, welcome back to the show. I'm Mark.
And I'm Ben.
And this episode, we are covering SpaceCamp from 1986. And this is a special one. Originally, we were going to do a roundtable, but due to scheduling and not many people could do it. So right now we have Ben and myself. We're going to be covering it. The synopsis of the movie, and keep in mind, this is spoiler full. So the synopsis of the movie is Andy Bergstrom, played by Kate Capshaw, an astronaut eagerly awaiting her first trip to space, runs a summer camp for teenagers with her NASA-employed husband, Zach, who is played by Tom Skerritt. One night during an engine test, Andy and 4 teenage campers are accidentally shot into space. Together, the group, which includes Catherine, Leah Thompson, a pilot in training, and Tish, played by Kelly Preston, a dis with a perfect memory, must work together to operate the spacecraft and return home. Now, it's pretty funny how I got this synopsis, too, because I got it from IMDb, and it's very lacking.
It is. It's. There's a few important details left out there.
It is.
It's also,
yeah.
It's also important to realize this is not the only movie named SpaceCamp that came out in 1986. So you have to be sure that it's the one that's all one word and not 2 words.
Correct. I don't recall if I ever saw the other one.
The other one was a horror movie about someone trying to go to space camp and someone trying to kill them along their entire journey. So it's, I think they were just trying to make a cheap 80s horror movie off of what they thought was a big blockbuster, or what was going to be a big blockbuster.
Well, obviously this one paid off because I know this far more than I ever did of that particular film.
Yeah, for sure.
So, like I said, listeners, this is a spoiler full, but obviously if you've never seen the movie, a lot of people like to listen to these podcasts so that they're familiar with the movie before they get to watch it, or if they've heard it already and they're just like, well, I've been already told a lot of cool things about this movie. Who needs to watch the movie? The one thing about the movie, though, is you might not be able to find it. And I've looked on all streaming apps and anything. Not even HBO, Showtime, or Paramount have this particular movie playing on their streaming devices as well. You can't find it like on Netflix. That you could literally, if you really, really want to look for it, you could find maybe a used copy on DVD online through
that's
Amazon.
What I had to dig out my DVDs from under the couch and go way back in the archive to find this one, and then watch it on 25% of my 75-inch TV because it's not widescreen or letterbox or anything. It's just 4:3.
Oh, it's a 4:3 aspect ratio. So you had what would be called full screen back in the day.
Yeah.
Or pan and scan, as we like to call it. All right. Yeah. Well, yeah, this is an older film. It doesn't get its just desserts, but I do enjoy it. But we'll move right into what I like to call as general thoughts and memories. Actually, no, let's not do that first. Let's go into people we may know because we've already spoken about a little bit in the synopsis. So, people we may know within the film. So I'll start off. Well, Kate Capshaw, who plays Andy, which I mentioned in the synopsis. We know her from such films like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom from 1984, Dreamscape 1984 as well with I'm forgetting Dennis Quaid, and that was a pretty decent movie back in the day too. And Black Rain in 1989. Well, she married legendary producer director Steven Spielberg and has been married since 1991 and still going.
The next person you may know is Lee Thompson, who played Catherine. We know Lee Thompson from so many roles, especially from the 80s. All the Right Moves, 1983, Red Dawn, 1984, and of course, what most people probably associate her with, the Back to the Future series, which ran from 85 to 90.
Yeah. I had a big crush on her when I was a kid.
I had a big crush on the next one when this movie came out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the next one is Kelly Preston, and she plays Tish. Started her career first in TV in a Hawaii Five-0 episode in 1980, and can be seen in multiple TV show appearances as a character actor till, I would say, 1984, in the Blue Thunder series, or TV series. So the Blue Thunder TV series was based after the original Roy Scheider and Malcolm McDowell movie called Blue Thunder. That was before Airwolf became huge. Yeah, you could see her in that. Films that she's been in, it would be Christine in 1983, Twins in 1988. A lot of people do remember that one. The Experts in 1989, that had John Travolta in it. Jerry Maguire in 1996, and Sky High with Kurt Russell in 2005. She was married to John Travolta from 1991 to her untimely death from breast cancer in 2020.
Yeah, that was a really sad thing when she passed.
And she wasn't really working all that much even before her diagnosis. So
not well into the 90s she wasn't, but she was a staple for those of us who grew up in the 80s and watching 80s movies. She was kind of always there.
Yeah, she was the pretty girl that we all liked.
The next person, Larry B. Scott, who plays Rudy. We know Larry from such films as Karate Kid, 1984, Revenge of the Nerds, which was also 1984, Iron Eagle, 1986, and Revenge of the Nerds 2, Nerds in Paradise, 1987, just to name a few. He's got a ton of credits to his name.
Oh, yeah.
A lot out there that you'll recognize him from, may not even realize that that's who it was, but pretty big household name as far as recognition.
Yeah, definitely. Well, next up, Joaquin Phoenix as Max, or as entitled in his credits as Lee Phoenix, playing Max in SpaceCamp. So Joaquin in his early career was known as River Phoenix's younger brother. He started his career with the name Leaf, but changed it later on. SpaceCamp was his first feature film after being on multiple TV series appearances from various shows. Other films we may know him from after this are Parenthood in 1989, 8mm with Nicolas Cage in 1999, Gladiator, of course, in 2000, where he played the big bad, and of course, The Joker in 2019. And currently in production is Joker 2 with him and Lady Gaga.
Yeah, this movie, the more we get into this, it had what is now a huge cast for the size of film that it was. The next person we have is Tate Donovan, who played Kevin. Tate started his career in TV, making appearances as characters in several shows from 84 to 86. SpaceCamp was actually his first movie appearance as well. Since then, other movies he was in, Memphis Belle, 1990, that was a great one. Love Potion number 9, 1992. He voiced Hercules in the Disney animated cartoon in 97. He was in Shooter in 2007, most recently Argo 2012.
Yeah. And a lot of people will remember that he dated Jennifer Aniston at one point. I remember that from the tabloids. It's so funny. Last but not least, Mr. Tom Skerritt, who plays Zach, and a well-known actor over the years with 170 TV and film credits. So we can recognize him from such movies as, and just to name a few, honestly, Alien in 1979 as Captain Dallas, legendary movie, legendary character. Top Gun in 1986, where he played Viper. And, of course, Contact in 1997 as David Drumlin, which my friend Diana and I covered here. Actually, no, not Diana. It was Lizzie. Lizzie and I had covered here on Adrenaline Cinema. So that was one thing. That was actually a really decent episode. So if you guys are interested, go back and listen to that. All right. So next up is general thoughts, memories, and any thoughts you have when you first saw the movie. So, Ben, did you see the movie in the theater? What was your experience with this movie?
I did not see the movie in the theater. This movie actually has a really interesting backstory because it was released in 1986, and we all know something else happened in 1986 that was a tragedy and also related to the shuttle program. 1986, January, I believe it was when the Challenger disaster took place. And as a result of that, this movie's theatrical release got pushed back quite a bit. It was months later that they actually released it because the Challenger tragedy happened because of a rocket booster failure. And the accident that leads to all of this in this movie is a rocket booster failure. So I get the feeling they intended this movie to be a big blockbuster, like summer kind of movie. And because of that, they really toned down the marketing and stuff. I didn't see this in the theater. We were video store kids. We lived in the video store, and I rented this regularly from probably 1987 through the mid 90s. It was one of my favorites, but that was my exposure to it, was the renting it in the video store. It just had a cool cover and came home with me. And I liked it from then on and watched it, occasionally ever since then. Where were you exposed to it at?
I was exposed to it through HBO. It was one of those shows or movies that they would play, and if you were subscribed to HBO, like my family was, especially in the mid 80s, they would play it repetitiously almost every day, at least 3 to 4 times a day. So even if you were off, but I remember it and I just watched it. It was one of those movies I just left it on because I really did enjoy it. And obviously I would just, you would get a blank VHS and record it off the TV and watch it over and over again too. With me and my history of it, like I said, I didn't get to see it in the theater like, you as well. You didn't, you rented it. Unfortunately, with that tragedy with the Challenger, that I saw that live happen, and they gave us a half day at school. They literally sent us home, and my father came home from work because he was still working, I think, at that time. And he was like, "Hey, how you doing?" And I'm like, He goes, "What are you watching?" Mind you, they still replayed it on the news in the afternoon. They kept replaying it. This is before CNN and everything. And my father was just like, "Yeah, I just saw the space shuttle blow up." He was like, "What?" But it was the weirdest thing. And then when this movie came out, it still didn't lose that effect of me wanting to go. I was always in school, and just to give a brief history, I was always enamored with the idea of SpaceCamp. Have you ever met anybody that went to SpaceCamp or no?
I haven't. I've never met anybody who got to go. I always wanted to go.
Yeah.
And I think this movie probably gave me false impressions of like how active and cool it really was.
Yeah.
When in reality, I think it's kids like 8 years old that are going to this and not 17-year-olds. But, nonetheless, I always wanted to go after this movie, and I really wanted a robot that cussed and took things literally. So
Oh man, yeah. The robot. That was the only difference in the movie that would be you have to suspend your disbelief with. But with me, it always drew my fascination to the camp. I was always jealous of those kids because
yeah,
I had like 2 or 3 kids that I went to because I went to public school in New York City. And one of the kids was like, "Hey, I just got back from space camp," and it's like, "What did you do for the summer?" And ever since then, I was so enamored in it and eh, interested in going. And but my parents were not wealthy; they couldn't send me. I asked, they're like, "No, we can't afford that. You crazy?" My father is like, your father's a policeman. I have to work a second job. You have 3 other siblings, so
yeah. My mom was a school teacher, and she was a single parent. So yeah, where is it? Alabama? No, you can watch it on TV. Sorry about your
exactly.
luck.
Yeah, right. Uh, but the movie fulfilled all the fantasies of the camp that I would always fantasize about what would have happened and dreamed of. The movie, in my opinion, has the same heart that it did back then. So if you watch it now and you're an adult and you look at it and you ask if you ask yourself, hey, could this still be something people do? Unfortunately, there is no NASA, but it's still I would still think this is something for kids to do if need be. But I still love the movie regardless. It is slightly dated for some people, and I'm sure if I showed this to my teenage niece, she'd be like, that was kind of goofy.
I tried to get my 12-year-old to watch it with me today, and he ran off to play Roblox or something equally dumb. He just wasn't into it. So,
Yeah, well, with me, it still holds. I still have the love for it. I think it has to do with nostalgia, especially for the '80s, because as we get into it, there's one scene though when Kevin pulls into somebody's parking spot, but he's blasting Eric Clapton.
oh, the music in the first part of this movie before the inevitable happens. The music in this movie, I actually took that down in my notes. The soundtrack was everything that was cool in 1986. It was great.
Yeah.
And also John Williams did the score for this movie.
Ooh, that's something to tell my my friend Rob as we do Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. I forgot about this.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
it's John Williams' score.
Oh wow! So that the music was actually pretty good. I didn't even look into that when I was doing the notes for this, but yeah, but the score does hold up, and it adds to each scene, I think. But with that, we'll move right into what we like to call favorite scenes in the movie Space Camp. So Ben, what was your first favorite scene?
My first one is anything with Jinx the robot. It's just absolutely insane that they said this robot cost $27 million. It takes things too literally, and its chips aren't shielded good enough, so it's unstable after about 2 hours of use. So let's just give it to children. That's, it's fine. Nobody has to keep up with it. It's great. But it really, this movie moves really fast. It goes a little bit of background and information, just maybe a half an hour worth, the main chunk of the movie, and then it's over. You don't find out anything. You don't, so it moves really fast, and I really liked the scenes with the robot. He's my favorite character in the movie.
Jinx. that little voice that he does. Yeah, I do enjoy the robot. The robot was pretty cool. I just like the fact that they mention how he's the most expensive handyman in Space Camp. And in the relationship with Max himself, to me it was like the friend that Max always needed.
That he never had.
Yeah. So it's very cute, very appealing to the youth at that time, or still to this day.
and it even still speaks this day. We don't have a $27 million robot, but it kind of makes you think about AI and what could happen.
Yeah.
It's not that far fetched even today.
Yeah. Well, there's a movie that came out years ago, and well, since we're not doing guilty pleasure movie, Megaforce was a movie that I always enjoyed as a kid, and it had I'm forgetting the actor's name, Boxworth or Box. It wasn't Barry Bostwick. Bostwick. There you go, Barry Bostwick. And it was their idea of a time. It's before GI Joe, when we had our GI Joes from Hasbro, and didn't have a GI Joe movie. All we had was the cartoon. So it was that kind of concept where they had these motorcycles that could fly. They have the rockets on them. They have the machine guns on them. They had these like huge, weird looking tanks with lasers. Within the movie itself, they had what would be called like a hologram machine, and it would play out, and it was one that was very much interactive. So if you speak about AI, since they're, Jinx wouldn't be something that would be out today, it would be more AI. It would be more of like a hologram, an interactive hologram AI, I would think now.
Yeah, some type of thing like that. You mentioned Barry Bostwick. I actually met him at a con 2 or 3 years ago, and of course now I think he's known for Sex and the City or something dumb. Like that's the big thing on his poster, not the 80s movies that we all know him from. But yeah, he was a very prolific actor during my youth.
Yeah, I remember that too. Did you have another? Oh, actually, I didn't say what mine was.
No.
Well, I have to agree with you though. Mac's attachment to Jinx and their relationship, that was pretty cool. Rudy and Kevin talking about life just outside the barracks of the camp itself was pretty interesting. It was the dialogue was actually very good in my opinion for this kind of a movie. It shows how kids are treating each other, how peers are to one another. Rudy, they like his friends would be asking him, like, well, you like science? Why you like science? And he's like, no, he goes, it was like, because they didn't think he was cool because he liked science by his other friends. And he's telling this to Kevin, and he goes, well, ask me if I'm any good at it. He goes, not so good, huh? He goes, no. And that's why, but he just has that love for it. And that's the whole reason why he went to SpaceCamp. But with Kevin himself, his attitude is like he just wanted to get away from his parents, or they were ready to throw money at him to get him out of the house.
And I think you bring up a great point, because I think when Kevin and Rudy are talking, I think that's that first glimpse of the leadership that we're going to see from Kevin later.
Yeah,
because your first impression of him is, look at this douchebag. You have he's just a punk. His attitude is crap, but you start to see that maybe he cares just a little bit more than he lets on. In that scene that you mentioned, it was a great part of the movie.
Yeah. You have a next one?
I really enjoyed Tish's character, and I don't think that she got enough recognition. She was essentially a genius, but everybody wrote her off as a moron because she liked, current cool things and, wanted to be a disc jockey and things like that, which nobody would even think of nowadays. But, she dressed like typical mid-'80s teenage girl would, and she didn't give that impression, but, it was later ended up being her idea that saves the whole crew, but you don't see her get a lot of recognition for that. But I did appreciate her character being not your typical dumb blonde moron that's the punchline of the movie. She actually contributed and was extremely intelligent, but really that wasn't the focus from the movie. But I liked her character quite a bit.
Yeah, her character was kind of like a side character, if you think about it and how they wrote it. And like you said, they play her off as being a ditz, but she has this photographic memory, and that's how she remembers everything. It's like the way she rattles off everything to Catherine on the bunk bed about what page and what it was, and Catherine's like, what did you get on your SATs? Oh, and it's like, well, I forgot.
800 or something, yeah.
No, they're like 1200s or something like that. And the look on Catherine's face is her mouth just drops. Like, well, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
So, and she's always chewing gum, but and it's cool though. It was like, I don't know, I would date I would definitely date Tish if I had the opportunity. She definitely knows how to be great in a jam too, especially since she knows Morse code off the top of her head like that.
It turned out to be pretty useful in this case, but
yeah. Oh,
well,
wow. Yeah, I agree with that. The character definitely underwritten, I should say, and underused. But in a sense, she's always part of the core group. Kind of like I have the image up to on Instagram and on Facebook for promotion for this. And literally it's all of them in the shuttle when they're all trying to look out the window. So you can see it, and it looks like something out of like a Star Trek thing, especially with the uniforms and everything. So I thought, to me, she's part of that crew. So
for sure.
She has her shining light moments, very much almost like Rudy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very similar. It wasn't a poorly written movie at all. It was very well written overall. Like I said, I think they intended for it to be a lot bigger than it ended up being. What was another one of your favorite parts?
Well, the group coming together as a team with all their abilities to make it work to get back to in this case, instead of what it wasn't, I'm forgetting the first shot they were supposed to go, but then they went to of course Rudy's like, I'm remembering something. They went to White Plains. No, White Sands.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just love that interaction, and I just love that aspect of them working as a team, whereas before, where Andy was very hard on Catherine and each of them at certain points, like even throughout the camp, and then she gets taken out and a little bit of an accident on Daedalus, or trying to obtain some sort of oxygen for Daedalus from Daedalus, and they're stuck in their own thing. They're like, they wind up coming together equally. Rudy with the arm, Kevin leading, of all things, Max trying to convince him with using Star Wars quotes to get him to be not so scared to go get it, because he's small enough to get the oxygen. And on top of that, at that same time, Tish figures out the whole idea of like, hey, Morse code, because they could monitor their lengths.
Yeah. And she also figured out how to shrink the spacesuit so that Max could fit into it to actually get out of the shuttle, which was another big contribution.
Yeah.
That was from her funky sense of style that she figured that out. But it was, that first time they're in the simulator, the whole thing is a hot mess.
Oh, yeah.
And, we see them go over the matter of a course of a few days to this cohesive team. It's actually a really interesting movie about teamwork. I'm trying to finish my degree right now, and a couple of my business classes actually have us watch movies and like talk about aspects of how teams develop and things like that. And this would really be a good movie to use for that if you were doing something like that, because they do kind of play off each other's strengths and figure it out, because their lives depend on it.
Yeah, well, in the heat of the moment, they had to do that. For the fact that otherwise they were going to die. But it definitely does show how well you could show the positive and the negative effects, and all you really need to do is show maybe the scene in the shuttle, and then go the scene in the simulator itself, and then show the difference. And don't necessarily have to say, hey, watch the whole movie, but you can if you wanted to. But for motivational, because at my job, they sometimes do that for home theater installations. Like, hey, bunch of guys, we're just to give you an idea. Here's about motivation and how to work together collectively as a team. And it'll work, I think, instead of what they usually have us watch. But yeah, I thought that scene was that whole, it centers around multiple scenes within the movie. But yeah, I think it worked, and I thought that was pretty cool. Did you have another one?
I thought that the practical effects were okay in this movie for the time frame.
Yeah.
Like the scenes where they're doing the spacewalks and in the cargo bay of the shuttle and the Daedalus station, that's all pretty well done for a movie that's not as widely known as this one. You would expect it to be a lot worse, but I thought that all of those scenes were pretty cool and well done. I found it a little bit coincidental, I guess, that under construction station with no living quarters happens to have the exact oxygen tank that they need to make the shuttle continue to keep them alive. Like, that's a little bit of a stretch for me, but it's the 80s. I'm willing to let it go. We didn't have a fix it up collage or anything, so I'll take that trope. It's okay. It just happened to be right there next to them, but those scenes were well shot. I thought the shuttle where they have the exterior of the shuttle kind of drifting in space. It's a little bit dated or aged now, but I enjoyed all of the scenes in space. That was, as a kid, that was so cool to see.
Yeah. Definitely on blue screen and, just the same imaging that they would do in the 80s for like Star Wars films. And that's what we grew up with. That's what we had. We didn't have the luxury of CG.
No, this was all before Star Trek V ruined CG for the rest of eternity. So,
but my last one would be Andy's dream finally come true, but in the most unusual way. She's finally able to get into space, but through an accident, and of course, Jinx had to make that happen. Him and Max are such good friends. I wish I could do the voice of Jinx. I used to as a kid, but not any older. Not as I get older, I can't do it.
No, I can't do the voice. But the guy who does the voice, that was Frank Welker from Transformers, and I mean, literally almost every animated series has had Frank Welker do some type of voiceover for it.
Yeah.
So Jinx was in good hands. But yeah, the whole thing was caused by Jinx. He literally went in there and basically forced this error to happen, interfacing with the NASA mainframe that they said only happened like 1 in 4.2 million years, I believe. And his simple response is, Max isn't going to live that long. We have to figure something else out. Like he's very practical and pragmatic. I like that guy.
Yeah. Well, and it shows the devotion and love to have Max's dream come true to go out in space. As well as Andy's too, for the fact, she didn't get to go to the moon, but at least she got to be in space with the shuttle. At least.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know that at that point in history in the mid 80s, anybody was going to the moon. I guess it makes sense that her husband was able to be one of the people who was on the moon, because he was, by my math, 20 years older than her when this was filmed. So I guess he pulled that off. So
yeah, well, yeah, he likes them young, I guess.
For sure. No hate, but there's a couple of things. So their relationship, obviously there's a tremendous age difference.
Yeah,
which can be written off because he doesn't look as old as he was when he filmed the movie. You have the token scene of all of the underage teenagers in their underwear in the bunk room hanging out, like from the 80s. That was I don't know you get away with that these days, but that was pretty well a staple of my youth, so I was glad to see it. But
yeah, well, this movie, I'm thinking PG-13. It's got to be PG-13. So yeah, they could get away with it then. Yeah, but then again, in the 80s, they were able to get away with a lot of strange things within film.
It was PG.
PG. Okay.
Yeah, actually, it was PG.
So yeah, they in PG films back in the early 80s, I remember a movie, Dragon Slayer, and they had nudity in it.
Yeah.
Like nowadays, that is a big no-no, let alone cursing.
No, it would not have gotten approved whatsoever. And they did have some cursing in this movie too, because that's one of Jinx's funny scenes.
Oh,
when he tries to define poop. It's family friendly here, but that's a fairly early scene in the movie too.
We're not so family friendly on this podcast, so it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, but it also kind of reminds me of a Robin Williams movie called Millennium Man, and it's like he's a robot trying to be a human, and he says the same thing. What a piece of fecal matter! He goes, no, it's a piece of shit.
Yeah, it was great.
But that's how it just reminded me of that with Jinx. So that's it when it came to our thoughts of the movie, our memories and favorite scenes. For me, what about you, Ben? Did you have any other things that you want to talk about?
The only thing I want to bring up, and it was just a little bit of a negative for me, is we have this whole climactic thing. They finally make it back, and you see the shuttle touching down, and then the credits roll. You don't see any, there's no reuniting of them with their families or the people at the command center.
That is true.
There's no after story. Like I said, this movie gets directly to the point, and it's an hour 47. It's not a short movie.
Yeah.
For that time, it was mid-length, I would say, or maybe even a little long. Most stuff was an hour and a half, 90 minutes. Long 3-hour movies were not a thing back then, except with a few exceptions. But that movie was it just cuts off. You don't find out what happened to anybody. There's no follow-up. What happened to they could have rolled one of those B-rolls that says, oh, so and so went on to do this, so
yeah,
but no, it's just over. Credits. Done. As soon as the wheels popped smoke on the runway, movie's over. So that was a little bit of a letdown. I think there was some room there to extrapolate on what happened, or at least show that, nice reunion, everybody hugging, and then freeze frame it and roll the credits. Something other than just we're done now. Thanks for coming type thing.
The writers really didn't think about that at that time, or basically it was for budget. Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, well, those are our thoughts, everybody. If you have any thoughts, we didn't get any. Actually, we did get feedback, but I will pull that up later. But now we're into interesting facts or unknown facts about the movie called SpaceCamp from 1986. So, Ben, you want to start us off with the first one?
Sure. We touched on this a little bit because I always get ahead of myself, and that's my fault. What was supposed to be a somewhat lighthearted action-adventure movie turned into a marketing nightmare. This movie was scheduled to be released in early 1986, but on January 28th, the real-life shuttle Challenger exploded 74 seconds after liftoff in front of all of us who were in elementary school at the same time. As a matter of fact, yourself and me included. We didn't get the day off, though. Claiming the lives of all 7 American astronauts, including a school teacher, which is why it was such a big deal for the schools. After that disaster, the release got pushed back by months. When it was finally sent to the theaters, it made less than $10 million in the U.S. Just like the Challenger accident, the malfunction in the movie involved a solid rocket booster. So like we said, it was so close to what actually took place that they just couldn't really push the movie, I don't think.
Yeah. It's one of those weird situations, like where a tragedy, it's very similar to, if you think about it, Spider-Man was pushed back a little bit with Tobey Maguire, the first one. And the reason why is because of 9/11. And they had to pull that trailer out of that particular, out of the theaters for that particular reason. Because and it was a main focus in the film. They actually had to pull whatever they had filmed out for, because I think it in the World Trade Center was in it, and Spidey literally traps like a car in webbing between the buildings, and they had to pull that. So it shows how tragic events in real life can affect film that we see now. And if you looked at that's a part of history of what we have in film and reality, of where they do filming and everything, and how it affects the film industry. Because years later with the World Trade Center, they would just eliminate those scenes out or edit them out in TV and
Sure.
film. It's weird.
And it's interesting because I feel like if this movie had been made a year earlier, it would have been a much wider known movie than it is now, because it came out, it did less than $10 million, and it went straight to VHS after that. And that was pretty much it. A lot of people just weren't exposed to it as a result of that.
Yeah. Next up would be Joaquin Phoenix feature film debut. Basically, it's his feature film debut. He had done what was it? Superboy. He was on the TV show Superboy. Made an appearance on that before this, but this was his first major film debut.
Yeah, I did not realize this was his first major film. He was in quite a few things before this as a kid, mostly TV shows and stuff. But the first thing I remembered him from primarily was Parenthood, which came out 3 years later in '89.
Yes.
That one was where I really remembered seeing him. But then you go back and watch this and realize, oh, heck, that is him. It's very interesting to see where he started at. He was
really young if you look at it with this one. Yeah. And then with Parenthood, with that movie, you had like an all-star cast too. Look at it. Yeah, Keanu Reeves, Martha Plimpton. Oh my God, he was in The Jerk.
Steve Martin.
It slipped in my mind because it was and there's like so many other people too in that film. That's another classic. Even though it was done in 90, what was it, 91,
89. 89 for Parenthood. You had Rick Moranis in that one. That was a great movie.
Yeah, well, it was at the tail end of the 80s, going into the 90s.
Sure.
So there are a lot of good stuff that still came out in the 80s. All right, next
one. The interior of the Space Shuttle Atlantis was filmed in the Atlantis simulator at the real SpaceCamp. This is actually part of the credits of the movie at the end. It says filmed at SpaceCamp in whatever city in Alabama. So they actually did use that whole facility to film this. So all those inside shots were from the actual simulator, which is, I guess, as close as you can get to the real thing, short of putting you in an actual shuttle.
Next one, according to Leah Thompson, because the numerous delays in filming, the cast and crew jokingly wore T-shirts saying "Space Cramp."
That's pretty funny. You have to know that you have to have a sense of humor about things, but I would imagine there's a point where you can only push so much before they start to push back. So that one kind of surprised me a little bit.
Yeah.
I can't see where it would take too long to film this movie. There's only like 17 people in it aside from the extras, and then it's all filmed at one location, and then the rest is special effects. So I would be curious to learn more about what went on that led to all those delays.
You could always ask Leah Thompson at a convention when she does come. Actually, they are still doing conventions, but you could still ask the people about certain things, but they can't be signing anything due to the of all the things, the SAG-AFTRA strikes and the WGA strikes. But if you go to a signing, it's like a meet and greet, you could always ask her. Why not? She's out there doing all these signings with Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, and Leah Thompson and herself doing with the Back to the Future reunions and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was. It's the actors and the writers are striking for good cause, but it has thrown the convention scene into quite a tailspin. I believe you and I know enough working actors and actresses to understand what they're fighting for, but it has made quite a mess of things with it going into TV season and the conventions and the way everything has been kind of disrupted. But everybody's out there making their best of it, and so we wish them all the best.
Yep, that we do. The last one?
This movie was partially filmed at the U.S. Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, home to the first and last remaining SpaceCamp program. And actually, in the movie, they mention, and I did not get a chance to fact check this, but Andy actually says 4 years ago the SpaceCamp was created to give you this experience. which would mean that Space Camp actually started in 82. And I'm quite curious if that's actually the case or if that was just made up for the movie. I have to feel like it's got to be pretty close to that. I don't see that program going way back into the 70s, but
No.
it was interesting because she was pretty specific about when the program started.
Yeah, it's I can't see it happening in the late 70s.
No.
But you have to factor in the space program was launched in the early 60s, if
Yep.
anything. And that would be within 25 years. Hold on. We could
Yeah.
have kids doing all this crap in a camp. I don't think that's possible.
And actually, now that I look it up, she was right. Launched in 1982, Space Camp has inspired and motivated young people from around the country and later the world, with attendees from all 50 states, U.S. territories, and more than 150 foreign countries.
Huh.
And even in the 80s, it cost between $1,000 and $2,000 to go, which is why you and I never made it there.
Well, back then that was a lot of money. Nowadays, it would probably be a few $1,000s, if not more.
I can only imagine what it costs nowadays with the way school tuition is. So, if it was $2,000 in the 80s, it's got to be with inflation, unaffordable now. But
yeah, very much like going to Disney World or Disneyland.
Yeah.
But all right, well that's all the interesting and unusual facts about the movie that I could find. But from here on, we go right into quotes. So, do you have any memorable quotes, Ben?
I really didn't. I didn't take down any memorable quotes. There were some in there, I'm certain of it, but I didn't remember anything specific.
Okay.
I liked. Obviously, I've mentioned it already. Jinx, the Max and Jinx, friends forever. That was pretty powerful. What he was willing to do for his friend, and I like that quote.
Yeah, it's like it's funny. It's like he's talking to the other computer, and then he does all this. And he's like, and he's like, I gotta do it. It sounds like as if he's talking to himself. But hold on, if you have access to the doc now, right?
Yep, I've got it.
All right, so if you refresh it, I just added some stuff. So if you want to take a look at them on the quotes, so that way you have something. There's a few in there that I think are funny that I had put in, but do you see them there now?
Yeah, I see them.
Okay, I'm just gonna go with the first one I have here, and this is Andy, and she goes, "So what brings you to Space Camp?" And Tish goes, "Well, I did this audit at GPL on a radio astronomy. It was unbelievable. I mean, can you imagine an extraterrestrial disc jockey? I mean, like listening to radio waves from space. I mean, like waiting for signs of intelligence." And then Andy responds like I know the feeling. Very much how you were referencing earlier.
And that goes right back to your first impression of Tish is, well, it's a good thing she's cute, because I don't think there's a lot going on there. And then we find out that is absolutely not the case.
Complete opposite.
Not at all. So let's see here. I liked this one. This was another good Tish when Rudy asks if they could breathe the liquid oxygen from the propulsion system. And Tish tells him that it uses nitrogen tetroxide, and that she says, "Rudy, we want to breathe, not dry clean our lungs." So that's another one of her little quips that shows that she's not quite as dumb as everybody might think she is.
One from Catherine, I liked it. It's easier to say you don't care than it is to try and fail. And that was her conversation with Kevin when they snuck out to go see see the space shuttle from, when they got it out of Max or Jinx, as it were, to how to sneak out of the camp.
Yeah.
For their date.
Giving them the directions. Yeah, that was great. All right, let's see here. Oh, the Rudy says, "Holy shit!" Jinx says, "Shit, solid waste aboard space station can be handled in one of two ways." And he starts going on, and then they stop him. That was a good one. This was when Max had him hidden in his closet at the boys' dormitory, which is again $27 million robot. Let's just give it to a child. It's fine. It's no big deal. Nobody's accountable for where this thing is.
That is true. Yeah, just let it roam free, and then somebody breaks it, which he did, or they did at one point, and then the kid winds up fixing it.
You have another one you liked?
Yeah. Well, this is from Andy to Max, and this is after they had to go to Daedalus to get the oxygen. She goes, "You think you're scared now? Wait till your parents get the bill for freaking Daedalus." Oh,
yeah.
man.
I like this one. Andy says, "Everybody, let's think. Where are we going to get more oxygen?" Kevin says, "I could run down to the 7-Eleven." There's a nice little product placement there.
Yeah.
I don't know that they have oxygen at 7-Eleven, but maybe somewhere.
One last one I have would be Andy. She goes, "I can't believe it. I'm going up. I'm not. Oh, no, it's her talking to her husband saying, she goes, "I can't believe it. I'm not going up. They chose Andy Miller instead of me. He gets airsick in cars." and Zach goes, "That's why I married you and not Andy Miller."
That was a very, very sharp quote. I enjoyed that one. And it's right off the rip. Like one of the very first things we see in the movie is this interaction between them. And that was a great quote. It was a really, really good one.
But yeah, that's all I had literally for quotes. But it's just to get that out there.
Yeah, there's not a ton of like one-liners in this movie, but it was solidly written all the way through from start to finish. I didn't really, aside from them ending it too abruptly, I didn't take any issues with the way it was written or the way it played out. It was a well done 80s action kind of movie.
Yeah, I agree. And it's something that I would always go back to look at. It's like me when I tend to throw this on every once in a while, and then if it's not this, it's the movie Explorers with Ethan Hawke.
Yes,
and River Phoenix. So those are
another
my go-tos. There's another one that I do mention that a lot of people just look at me if I have 5 heads, and it's got Lenny from Laverne and Shirley in it. I forget his name, the actor, but he was also in Breaking Bad. Not Breaking Bad. He was in Better Call Saul. Sorry, and it's called Daryl, and it's about a kid who's a robot, and he winds up, he gets snuck out of the lab, and he winds up, and then a family adopts him, and then he next, at the very end of the movie, he's flying a plane, a jet.
That was a great one. And Explorers, I grew up with Explorers, just like I grew up with this movie. This was a constant rental for me.
Yeah,
I loved River Phoenix's Wolfgang, the whole thing. That seemed like something my friends and I would do, like at the time. I was one of those kids, and that movie always held a special place for me. Still does. I'm with you. I'll throw it on. I'll throw this on.
Yeah,
there's a lot of stuff I watch, but these were particularly special to my childhood.
Yeah,
like you mentioned early on, the nostalgia of it, I think, is where we go back to.
Yeah, it's like kind of like for certain people of different age, around around 85, Back to the Future is like the typical standard. We always go back to it. Pee-wee, well, think about it. Pee-wee Big Adventure, and as well had come out too.
Goonies
and Goonies and all that. Those are the ones that we go back to and reflect on because we love. But there's certain I think there's a movie for every generation that comes out, and I think with you and I, it's about the same. We have the same idea and thoughts. I have friends, like I said, my friend Jamie. She's younger than me, but she and I think, and she thinks on that same level because that's why we covered we did They Live and Goonies at one point here on this podcast. So it's one of those, it's like, it is the nostalgia feel. And it's one of those movies. And if you look at it, this movie could not be remade. Goonies should never be remade.
No.
Back
Don't
to the
touch it.
Future. Don't touch it. You know.
Just leave it alone. And I try to think based off of what you were talking about. What is that movie for my kids? And you have like Frozen or Moana. I'm like, they just don't get the same experiences that we did as kids. And I think that time has passed, and I would appreciate them leaving it alone.
Yeah.
Did you say we had some feedback on this one?
Nope. I looked. I thought it was actually for my other podcast. I was supposed to record, so unfortunately we weren't able to record that one. But we are recording this week. Des and I were covering of all movies, Howard the Duck on Panels to Pixels podcast.
I actually left a comment on that one because that one was another part of my childhood. My mom should probably have not let me watch that movie, but he wasn't real bad about censoring what we watched as kids. My brother and I can go on about that one for a long time. That was bizarre.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I had it in my mind. I was like, somebody left feedback. No, they didn't, because they didn't really post anything about this until just today. And I realized it was like that because I lost power, and that's why I wasn't able to record. So it's been one of those weeks. But at least we got to do this. And well, there you have it, listeners. Our coverage of SpaceCamp from 1986. So, like I always said, leave us some feedback, and to submit your feedback, especially for this or any other of the podcasts that we do here on Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. All you have to do is go to our Facebook group, and then all you have to go is facebook.com/Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. Well, there you'll find an image of the topics that we're going to be covering. Obviously, I didn't do this until last minute today, but there will be more later on. I think I put a few up earlier for the past 2 weeks of things to look forward to. I still have the banner still for the thing that we did with Jerry and I. But literally just look for the image and just put, in the comment below your thoughts. And if you don't want to do that, you just want to send out an email, well, that's easy. All you have to do is send us a regular texted email at AdrenalineCinemaPodcast@gmail.com. Like I said, a texted email, and we'll read it on the podcast. And if you don't feel like typing, because sometimes I do get lazy, and I'll just record my voice on my computer or my phone and then send it as an attachment, as you could do so as well. Literally, we have these cool smartphones that are out there, sometimes an iPad. You could record your voice and record your message and then send it as an attachment in the email and just drop it in, and then we could pop it right into the podcast as we're recording to comment about it. Plus, gives you an opportunity to be part of the podcast. But that is a way for you to send in feedback. As always, for like supporting the podcast, I threw in something recently too on the Facebook page. We have a Redbubble section, so if you like the logo that we have, you get t-shirts, shower curtain, books, book covers, like iPad sleeves, whatnot. You can go to Redbubble's website through that link, and I'm going to leave that link in the podcast notes below. So all you have to do is click onto it and then go from there. But the other way to show us any sort of love, if there's a rating or review in whatever podcast player of choice that you use, please do so. Apple Podcasts, preferably, because a lot of people look at it as the premier podcast player of choice, and everybody has apparently an iPhone and an iPad. So, like I do, I have an Android phone, but I still use my iPad and my MacBook Air. So, yeah, if you could do that, it would be greatly appreciated. Highly recommend that you check out the PirateCoreEntertainment.com. So go to PirateCoreEntertainment.com, and you can find out all the other podcasts that are on the network that we watched it in the 80s, Adrenaline, obviously, and Fantasy Picks Movie Edition. I've still yet to add Panels to Pixels podcast to that. But you can check out all the others there and listen to their podcasts that way as well. But now we're at the point of well, where can listeners hear you, Ben?
You can find me occasionally at Two Key Geeks podcast. That's my brother and I's podcast we do on theme park visits, conventions, horror conventions, comic conventions, trips we take for anything pop culture, retro, vintage. It gets a little sporadic. We've been terrible about recording lately, though, so I really appreciate you having me on and letting me get a little bit of practice in on this, because I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week. Every week, I'm taking 12 to 15 credits of college every semester on top of that. And
Wow.
my brother owns a company now, so we very, very rarely have time to get together and do anything. So I appreciate you having me on and letting me sit and visit with you for a little while.
No, it's not a problem at all. I always like having my friends on come in whenever they can. This is a great opportunity for anybody who just wants to talk about something they love. And that was the whole point of this. It's like, when I did Iron Eagle, Alex and I had a great time. Or when Damien and Rima and I did Top Gun, and we did Top Gun Maverick, but we did in the very beginning when I first started this podcast, we did the original Top Gun. Nice. So that's when I had more time. It was during the pandemic. So I had, but the thing is that it's a way for us to get together and talk about the movies we love. Sometimes, like even with Fantasy Picks Movie Edition, when I'm on that, it's what Rob likes to do is like with his podcast is how would you make a movie better if it flopped and it was a bomb at the theater? It could have been really bad writing, could have been bad acting, or the wrong actor in the part. We did that. We just did Blade Runner 2049. And
nice.
We covered that, and we kind of played armchair directors and producers about it. And there was a way. It's like you only had a little bit of Harrison Ford, and we talk about it, and I mentioned it's like, well, just eliminate him and just make it all about Ryan Gosling's character trying to find him.
Sure.
And then, or if anything, put Decker in the actual movie from beginning to end. But no, we kind of worked and played with that. So yeah, you listeners could do that. You could go check out that one. He just dropped it today. So yeah, it is available. So Fantasy Picks Movie Edition, everybody. But for this podcast, well, that's pretty much it. And we're done. And I want to thank everybody for listening. And I wanted to thank you, Ben, for being on.
Thank you for having me. Once again, I appreciate it, Mark. It's always great to get together. I haven't seen you about a year, so yeah, it's always good to pop in and get to take a trip back in time. That's, the best quote from The Office is, it would be nice if you knew what the good old days were before they were gone,
That is true. Well, that was Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, everybody. I'm Mark.
I'm Ben.
And that's it. And we'll talk to you guys later.